welcome to Workshop A, which is the best workshop, I'm telling you. We've already had some really great content this morning about recruitment, retention, and reintegration of veterans and armed services in general. With this workshop, we're going to take a deeper dive into the topic. We know that Ukraine has considerable challenges at the moment, not least that its labor market has, in some areas, high levels of skill shortages, in other areas, high levels of inactivity and unemployment. In total, there are 17 million people who are internally or externally displaced. That is the size of the population of Cambodia. For any public employment service, that would be a huge, huge challenge, let alone a public employment service that's involved in an armed conflict situation at the moment. So we've got some great speakers here today. We have from Skill Lab, we have Simon Schmidt, who is a partner of Skill Lab, and as we have seen this morning, also a part-time moderator for conferences. I'm not sure which one he does best at, so I'm hoping that he will be a great presenter as well. And from Indius, Switzerland, from the office in Zurich, we have Vera and Mika, who are going to talk to you about another angle there, and that is how we can identify, train, recruit, and scale up coaches in Ukraine using other Ukrainian refugees. So they're going to look at a program that they deliver in Zurich that uses Ukrainian refugees to train other Ukrainian refugees to provide job coaching services, and whether or not that can offer a scalable solution to the shortages that the Ukrainian public service is experiencing at the moment. There will be some interaction, particularly in the first part of the presentation, and we will also have some opportunity for questions. So nobody will be allowed out for the dinner until I've had at least 4 questions from the floor. So pay attention, think hard, and make them really difficult, okay? Because these people are experts, they tell me. Okay, so without further ado, Simon, the floor is yours.
Hello again. Thank you very much, Anton. Please, 4 questions, all aimed at the folks from NGS, please. So I don't have to answer any questions, but thanks for showing up to this workshop. We'll be talking a little bit about a really critical challenge, and that is how do we reintegrate veterans back into the civilian workforce? And I'm going to be talking specifically about our work in Ukraine and how we're using, we call user-validated skills data to make those transitions possible, easier, and how we use skill data to unlock the workforce potential of veterans. First of all, a couple of words on the sheer scale of the challenge. Prior to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine had a total labor force, a working age population of about 20 million. Currently, 5 million people consist of veterans and their families. And in addition to that, you have internally displaced people, refugees, disabled folks. So reintegration and reintegrating all of these groups, but specifically veterans today, is a vital challenge and is an imperative for rebuilding a resilient Ukraine. So how do we address this challenge? How do we tackle a challenge of this magnitude? Our approach, the approach we champion at Skill Lab, we're presenting here in the context of a program that we're running together with the World Bank and the State Employment Service of Ukraine by the name of Supporting the People and Employers of Ukraine. And in this partnership, we are working with the State Employment Service in providing our skills-first, skill-based career guidance and labor market information solution to job seekers that come to the State Employment Service, and veterans are, as all other unemployed folks are, within the remit of the State Employment Service. In total, the data we're presenting today is based on the user-validated skills data from over 14,000 job seekers that have identified over 1 million skills from 50,000 different occupations. Users have identified over 28,000 career interests, and we've identified over 100,000 career matches for these folks. This wealth of data gives us an unprecedented view of what the skill perspective on the Ukrainian labor market looks like, and a really specific perspective of what the veteran skill perspective also looks like. But before going into the details on the numbers, we want to talk a little bit about the human impact of skills first, of skill-based career guidance. And that's really about, empowerment and about giving people an idea, the information, and the confidence to talk about their skills, to realize that they have valuable skills, to have meaningful interactions with an employment service through SkillUp, and to have the information about themselves, about the labor market at large, to meaningfully think about career pathways and required skills for those career pathways. But really, this process is about, first and foremost, building agency, building hope, and providing information about what the foundations of a successful job search are. Going a little bit into the details on veterans. So veterans themselves have added over 10,000 skills in this sample, and it's pretty clear that the skills are more than what the uniform shows. It's not all camouflage. So on the left here, you see a couple of the military occupations, and you see very much the typical military occupations, from squadron leader to artillery officer. But on the right, you see some military skills, and they go from what you would expect, military combat techniques, weaponry, operate radio equipment, to a couple of skills that are a little bit less obvious and that are truly a bridge to the civilian workforce. And we have skills there like teamwork principles, manage staff, apply conflict management, create solution to problems, listen actively. And these transversal, these soft skills are essential in conflict, and they're essential to successful military operations, especially in the way that Ukraine operates its military, with small, decentralized, independent operating units that are responsible for their own procurement, that are responsible for their own command and control. And so you get a really rich tapestry of skills that are important for the military, but that are as or more important for the civilian sector. And you can really see this here. These two beautiful, colorful wheels that are hard to read are a representation of how those military profiles fit into the civilian labor market. So we've done a deep dive into 100 military profiles, 100 veteran profiles, and 80% of these profiles have strong compatibility with jobs outside of the armed forces. So have a strong skill match to civilian jobs. Almost 70% of veteran profiles have a really strong skill match to in-demand non-military occupations and professions. So jobs that are in high demand, jobs that are actively hiring in Ukraine have a strong skill match towards the profiles of veterans. Veterans' ambitions are broad and diverse. As important as skills is motivation, interest is as important as skills, more important than skills. I'll leave that argument aside. But what's notable is that veterans do want jobs that are maybe not what you would expect. So from more obvious things like gate guard, you have jobs, you see jobs in here like lawyer, paramedic, sales manager, private chauffeur, aquaculture husbandry manager. I don't quite know what that is, but you can see that there's a really diverse set of career interests that veterans have identified based on their skills in our platform. So over 33 different industries are covered by veterans' interests. Now, I want to move from me presenting to the more engaging part. As Anton had promised, you will be actively involved in this presentation. And what I want to do is sort of mimic the work that counselors and PESs do every day. We have one skill here that was pretty evident in the work cloud: use different communication channels. And we want to think a little bit about what is the civilian applicability of that skill. So together with you, I would like you to discuss internally, think about, shout it out, civilian careers that could really benefit from someone who has that skill of use different communication channels. Where is communication important? Where is communication in different channels important? So I'll give the floor over to you. If you want to shout out an occupation, a profession that you think would be a good fit, now is the time. Help desk, yeah. ICT help desk or any other sort of help desk, yeah. Sales, for sure. Marketing, yeah. Social media manager, yeah. I can name some examples from the previous group. DJ was one of them. Radio DJ. I think, sorry? Facilitator, yeah. Trying different, this is only one channel right now, but I'm trying. Anything else? Any other ideas? There's no wrong answers. There's mostly no wrong answers because out of 3,000 ESCO occupations, so 3,000 occupations in the ESCO database, this skill is considered essential for 194 different occupations. And it's considered optional for another 150. So in total, almost 10% of civilian careers could use, benefit from someone with that skill. And that's a skill that is essential in the military and that we have seen across almost any military profile. So this is just as an example, just because a skill is acquired in the military doesn't mean it's not broadly applicable in the civilian sector. To build on that, here we have a real profile from a Ukrainian veteran, face, name changed, anonymized, but the skills are real. So Taras Melnik. Taras was an artillery officer in the armed forces of Ukraine, and he had the skills of devise military tactics, handle surveillance equipment, lead military troops, adapt to changing situations, use different communication channels, he sends a theme, carry out inventory planning, maintain logistics, adhere to organization guidelines, and he has 15 more skills that we will forget about for the moment. So what I would like you to do now is to, based on this profile, what is a non-obvious career recommendation? What is a non-armed forces career recommendation that you could imagine for Taras? Is he a good fit for that without any additional training? If not, what would a training program look like? What could we do to close those skill gaps? So again, I'll give you a little bit of time, and if you want to shout out any ideas, please do so. Transport manager, yeah. Logistics manager, that's certainly a good skill set for that, yeah. Yeah, correctional officer, yeah. Surveyor. Yeah. Yeah. Any other ideas? Suggestions?
Yeah, well, he has experience in tactics and leading groups.
Yeah.
So, and adapting to changing situations. So, a whole lot of leadership roles could be possible for this person.
Yeah, we framed that as operations and project management. Yeah. Yeah. So certainly any sort of situation where management of where you have to manage people, where you have to manage projects would be a really good fit. But there are still some gaps, right? Like if you want to work as an operations and project manager, you might need some additional training around around the software that's required, around project management certifications, whether you need a Scrum or a Prince2 certification. Whether you probably need some cross-cutting skills around corporate readiness. Maybe this person has never worked in an office environment with a computer before, maybe some office training. So there's certainly some skill gaps, but what I think is really important to note, supply chain analyst was another suggestion from the group before, warehouse operations, that there's a really broad applicability of these military skills. Lead military troops sounds like a military skill, but it's really a leadership skill, right? And the application might look a little bit different in the civilian sector, as As I think anybody here who's ever planned anything with anybody from the armed forces has found out that the way of working is slightly different and it will require some adaptation. But that's not different from anybody changing companies from company to company where the company culture is quite different. So overall, I think the takeaway for us from this was people with military experience, and we're only looking at one experience here. This person is more than likely to have had a job before the war, to have had some sort of education before the war. And there's a broad set of skills that if you just look at artillery officer, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, that guy would make a great logistics manager, right? Like that's not an obvious career path if you only look at the title. But if you delve a little bit deeper and you look at the skills, you get a deeper insight and you achieve more transferability in how you look at that person's profile. And specifically for armed forces, this has really broad applicability because as Casper said this morning, it's really about looking at what we can do, right? Like what can this person do? And that person can do more than be an artillery officer or remain in the armed forces. That person can be a supply chain manager. That person can be an operations manager. That person can be a project manager. And that is the takeaway here that we would like you to go home with, is that the skills first, the skills-based approach is able to unlock the workforce potential of veterans, specifically because we look beyond the job title and because we look at the specific activities that are necessary to perform in a job title, right? And so looking at the skills-first approach, you get the broad spectrum of what a person is capable of, which unlocks a much, much wider range of opportunities and potential pathways, and gives you a better idea of how to traverse any gaps between a person's profile and those pathways. The second piece that's really crucial is translating for employers, right? Working with employers, you may, if you send Taras's profile to a logistics company, the first reaction might be, why are you sending me profiles from an artillery officer? But they need to understand, the employers also need to understand that these people have really valuable skills and that these skills are transversal, translatable, transferable, and useful for their specific industry. That might require some work from the PES side to support this individual in translating their experience from, as it was said, leading military troops to leading teams, right? Like that change in language alone might make this much more tangible for the employer. Finally, design data-informed upskilling. Since you have the data on the profiles and you have an idea of what employers might want, you can use this skill data to pinpoint precise gaps and create targeted, efficient training pathways that are not start from scratch to learn about supply chain management, but you already know this and this and this, fill these gaps, get this certification, and you're ready to go. So in order to meet real labor market needs, meet them fast, and really fulfill and help veterans cross this barrier back into the civilian labor market, upskilling, reskilling is going to be crucial. Finally, we like to champion the skills-first approach. We like to talk about skills a lot, but we're also really aware that this is not the total picture and it's just one piece in the puzzle. Veterans have a range of cross-cutting issues from mental health to potential disabilities, barriers to work, and needs more socio-emotional support than a skill profile can offer, right? So it's one piece of the puzzle. We think it can be an important piece of the puzzle, but it's a piece of the puzzle nonetheless, and it needs to be embedded in more holistic coaching and more holistic socio-emotional support, psychosocial support, and a bunch of other, and creating more cultural awareness of the needs of veterans, whatever it takes, right? But it is one piece of the puzzle, and that's important to us, and I think that's important to our Ukrainian colleagues as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, and I'll hand the mic back to Anton.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Simon. Thank you. To me, the interest here is that this is evidence-based, and all too often this is what public employment services really lack in their toolbox, this kind of granular evidence that shows that a skills-first approach works and how that might be translated into particular pathways. And that provides a really good segue to Misha and Vera, who will be talking about how they use a skills-first approach, firstly to identify, recruit and train Ukrainian refugees in Zurich to become coaches, and then how they use a skills-first approach to bring other coaches successfully into employment and into the local community. So I will pass the floor to Vera and Mika. Thank you.
Hello from Zurich and now in Riga. Nice to be here, us together, and talking a little bit about the experiences that we have in Zurich. And I like very much what Simon said, that this is a puzzle. And he provides a very important piece of the puzzle, and we do another piece of this puzzle, so that the whole then gives a very good picture of this very, very challenging work to bring people back in work wherever they are and whatever challenge they have. And our presentation is this reintegration through holistic coaching. And since we would like to talk a little bit about our experiences, first of all, we would present in some words what NGOs is, a part of a global human service group in 11 countries and 35 years of experiences, very specialized in employment, health, and education. And this is what we do in Zurich too, and we had the focus very much on people who are handicapped and who needed support. And in 2023, when we started or restarted in Zurich, then we changed a little bit the view from the pure service of just vulnerable people who had a problem with the body or whatever, and we decided to focus our complete work to support the Ukraine. So we stopped with everything else and we focused on the Ukraine. And one of the most important things that we did there was the peer coaching on the one hand, Ukrainians coaching fellow Ukrainians. And this is why we then started to engage Ukrainian-speaking coaches. 50% of our people, of our staff is talking Ukrainian. And Vera is the first of them, the first who started coaching in her language. And she's a perfect example of transferable skills, and she will talk about this to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Micha. First of all, a little bit more why I'm here. Just because I'm Ukrainian, I'm from Odessa, and to protect my family, my daughter, I fled to avoid war horror. And right now I work as a job coach and support Ukrainian refugees in Switzerland to integrate them and finding a right job, suitable job. And when I heard about this project, I decided to jump into it because I see it's like an opportunity to help people in Ukraine, also for veterans and so on. What is important for veterans and for refugees, I guess, for both groups, it's to live their lives. And maybe it's a surprise, but what do you think? What does it mean to live life? To have It's about simple thing. The person have a coffee in the morning. The person have a job, have an occupation. It speaks about her stability, mental health, and I guess it's really important. And as a job coach, I know about difficulties to integrate in new environment, and we speak today about reintegration. I guess it's a similar problem, similar difficulties, and we in NGOs believe we can help finding a right approach to bring these people to home and to work. So we know about some questions in Ukraine. It could be a challenge, it could be also opportunities, but we know that about 70 million could benefit from help to reintegrate. Employment is a key for social integration, and we believe we know how to strengthen the capacity of public employment services.
And for this, we created in Switzerland a model that is quite efficient. It is skills and competences that we see as key to build an accurate prediction about the future. And what we focus with our coaches is to use the natural behaviors, which is very important, the past experience and the transferable skills, as you have been listening from Simon already. There are some issues that are important in this direction of development, and this is why we have a view to the whole person as itself, especially when we talk about trauma-sensitive approach that we have as a core part of our coaching approach in Zurich. And when we do this, we really look very much on the capabilities of the coaches. They just don't need to be specialists in how to do coaching work, but they need to understand the person in itself, so the personality of the coach itself. And training the personality is more important than everything else, because it is with this that they then can approach to the people that they accompany, because they have to understand what they are and just not only follow a line of subjects that they should discuss with them if the CV is right or whatever. It's much, much more than this. And so you have to have the right people, and you have to train them right, and you have to train them very fast, because we don't have time. The people are now there and need support, and not in 3 years. So how can we train the coaches to be very fast in this efficient role that they need to be? This is with our turbo training that we are doing, and this is a plug and play system that helps then finally to meet the requirements that we have. One of the most important approaches that we have in overall is to assure for a better life tomorrow. And for a better life tomorrow, in these 35 years, we found out that job first is the most important and most key point to, and this is very important as well, to stabilize the person in whatever situation they are, if they have or not a very mental subject or whatever subject they might have to be reintegrated. The stability they get is with a job. If they have one or if they don't have one, that is a really big difference. And that's why we focus so much on this and how we can bring them into this subject, because as I said, when they have trauma subjects, then we need to know how to accompany this so that we can, at the end, find the right balance between job and the real life. And in this whole approach, the employer has a very important role, and this is Vera talking about.
Yes, the main point here is that the employers is crucial for successful reintegration. We have two sides. We have a request from employer, and we have skills from future employee. And veterans and refugees bring valuable skills, but it could be so that they may face stigma. But every war will be ended. Veterans come home and might be perceived as disengaged or not motivated. How to bring them back to work in teams, and we are sure that here should be human touch. Just because to match the request from employer and employee skills. We know about that a lot. Our experience says that with coaching support, it works better. And we help employers with inclusive hiring practices and team awareness, unlocking hidden talent, and expanding access to skilled candidates.
What is the relevant thing that we can bring from Swiss is something that we have been proven with all the work that we've been doing for 10 years. We had a long time collaboration with our partners that send us the responsible people to support. And so we focused, as we already spotted out, to this combination of mental health, trauma, and job placement in all ages. And one of the most important subjects is here, one of the best solutions that we found out is to have an extended support, be longer with the people that we support than normally is the idea or it has been planned, because what very often is not seen is that if you put somebody into a new job, then he will sign a contract, and a lot of people think then the work is done. But this is exactly wrong, because from the signature on, the job really starts. The problems might really start because they come into a completely new environment. They don't know anybody there. They have their problems. They bring them with them. They come into the team that they don't know. They may be stigmatized. They might be not able to communicate. They might be able not to understand how this works in the job. And very often then they run out, they are kicked out, and then they are on the street again and try to find a new job. And have to find a new job. And this is the approach that we have, that we accompany them much more over the signature, much longer time. And the result is that instead of the requested 45% that we have to fulfill from the state, we go to 70% of success. So 7 out of 10 people coming to us, we find a job for them. And the most important of this is 90% of them are very happy about what we are doing, because we support them, because they call us, hey, I have a problem, what can I do? And the coach is there and says, okay, I will go with you through the next week that you have to face, what is the subject that you will be discussing, and what are the issues, especially on the communication way. And maybe here's one very important subject that we discuss. The one thing is that we find out what are the skills of the people, what are their knowledges, what have they been trained for, what is that they learned in school, that they had already maybe in another job. And now they change, they come into a completely new environment. Everything has changed around them. So maybe a big part of their personality might be in question as well, and they have to revise this. And so we go further than just not only looking on the skills, but we might be finding for them completely new job, completely different way of how they might continue their life to have a better tomorrow. And this is important because they need, if they really want to have a stable future, be happy with what they are doing. And that might be a completely different job than they did before. So what can a little Switzerland do for the huge Ukraine with all these big challenges that they have? The most important thing to our perspective is to live and translate this social integration, to have the capability from our knowledges that we can train coaches in the Ukraine, that we can support them, how to approach these people coming from wherever as a veteran or from another country back home, to bring them into the country, into the people, and into the job again, with all the partners as a holistic model. And apart from this, we have already 2 countries, Canada and Australia, where we have veteran programs available. And so we very well understand as well this translation into other cultures and borders. This is it from us for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Misha and Vera. And I think what for me is particularly interesting is that issue of sustainability. In mainstream workforce development, we know that around 30% of people that we place leave a job within 60 days. So that's a terrible attrition rate, and that questions the matching data. So what would be really interesting for me, using Skill Lab data and using Skill Lab techniques of skills transferability, would be to see whether you could improve the matching and whether you could reduce that attrition rate of 30%. So I think that's, for me, the takeaway specifically from the presentation there. We have some time, so I would love to open the floor to some questions. Now, I can see that after tea, coffee, and chocolate brownies, you're all really eager to put our panelists on the spot with some difficult questions. And I can see one from our friend Niels already. He's got hunger in his eyes. Niels, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Let's try again. Okay, thank you very much for 2 very interesting presentations. And I have a question on the second one, which was also mentioned a little bit in the first one, because you talk about severe trauma and mental health. And you spoke about a turbo training. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that training. What kind of skills do you learn these coaches? Because the difficulties can be quite severe, and I would imagine that you need very expert skills to deal with that kind of trauma and mental health problems. So if you could maybe explain a little bit more what that entails and how you make sure that people actually have the right skills to deal with these difficult challenges. Thank you.
Thanks very much for this very challenging question, because it is indeed one of the most important topics that we have when we try to get coaches. What we try to find and what we really achieve to find and what we like to translate then later into another country is that the coach really understands his job. And to understand a job is especially how can he cope with this special, challenging mental or whatever situation that he is faced with. So not only that we, for example, have here Ukrainians talking and be a coach for Ukrainian people, this is automatically that they understand much better the mentality. Then we, in combination, work with Ukrainian therapists and Ukrainian psychologists in a triangle to discuss then among each other these subjects, and this always on an individual approach. So what our coaches are learning, and this is a tough learning, although it is a very short one, we do it directly on the job. With tandem coaching, so they go with the others together, is to learn always to start with a blank sheet of paper when they have somebody in front of them, and learn how this person, with or without his skills, appears, and this is a lot about feeling. And when we try to get these coaches, we are very close in this selection phase, and we observe them and we understand, do they feel it? And only when they feel it, they don't have to work just with a list of what they should do with people in front of them. They have to feel this situation. They have to understand, when do I have to call the psychological person? When do I have to add, for example, another coach? Sometimes we need two coaches for one situation because this is very challenging. So this is not just standardized coaching. It's not the way, but you can train this, and we learned this in Germany, and we learned this in Switzerland, and this is why it is very stressful, but very effective and very happy. I always see them smiling when they go home in the evening, that they had a good time, and the people are happy, and 90% of satisfaction, I guess, is a good answer to if the people are happy after coaching.
Thanks very much. And I think the point you make is really very, very important. I think there's a lot of evidence to show that many armed services personnel leave the services with some kind of mental disability, be it on the spectrum of a milder depression, for example, right through to PS. And I think that much of the evidence suggests that initially, at least, talking therapies can be very, very effective. The question is how long you continue those therapies for, and therefore, from a public employment service perspective, how long or what systems do you use to ensure that those therapies can continue so that you build the employer trust. And I certainly think, in the Netherlands, certainly US, Canada, have kite marks of quality for employers to underline that employers are sensitive to ongoing mental illness or traumas that people leaving the armed forces may well face. But I think that's one of the most critical issues around transferring mainstream coaching, tailoring mainstream coaching to those from the armed forces. But thank you. Any other questions, please? Remember, there'll be no departure from this. Oh, we have one. Azza, please.
Hi, I am Azza from Skill Lab. So for sure my question for the second presentation, not the first one. Okay, so I just, because we are talking about integration and reintegration, and we are focusing more on the employee and job seeker side, do you do any effort in the employer side also, because it's two-way integration? And another question, because you were talking about the client satisfaction, here we are talking about the employees, job seekers, right? Do you have also satisfaction in the employer side, and do you think there is correlation between the employer satisfaction and retention and progression for the reintegrated employees?
Thank you for your question, Azza. Best question. I like that about numbers. Sorry, but I don't have some numbers about employers. But I have to say that about my experience, people who employed, not right now, not on the labor market. So they are not in a seeking process. They work. That's why I guess it could say something about satisfaction of employers. That's why it's approximately the same number, 70% of satisfaction. Maybe.
I maybe can answer or add something to this. We sometimes have employers calling us and saying, "Hey, you sent us this Ukrainian guy. Do you have 5 more, please?" So this is a good answer, I think, because we go with them to the employer. We don't hide anything. We explain exactly what it is. We talk about the challenges that they might have. This is, in our perspective, of course, the question of language in Switzerland. If you don't speak Swiss, you're not very well accepted in the labor market. But we managed to bring them anyway there. In the Ukraine, it will be completely different. There will be 2 very huge groups coming, and they are stigmatized. Then this is a really big problem. They are not very welcomed. They said, "Oh, this is cowards. They didn't like to come. They fled from our country. Why should we take them back?" And they are 3-4 years away from the labor market. The skills is in question and all these subjects. So we talk about this often, open, and we go into the employer topic, into the teams. This is what we then have to do to make this understanding, to recreate, and this is one of the very, very tough jobs of the coaches then to do.
2 tough questions there. Thank you very much. And I think employer engagement is really, really crucial here. And I think that's the other read across for mainstream services, for public employment services. How do you engage employers who may be at best reticent, at worst suspicious and antagonistic towards ex-service personnel and some of the baggage that they perceive they might bring with them to their jobs? Sandrine, I saw your hand go up, and you can all thank Sandrine because you can go home this evening when this question is done. Thank you.
Thank you. An important part of displaced people, women, for example, are qualified or even highly qualified. How do you deal with the fact that some vocations can be less qualified than their profiles, and isn't there a risk that they feel underestimated, or is there a risk on their self-confidence, or how do you deal with that? Because some of them were maybe, I don't know, teachers, scientists, researchers, or so on. So how does it work when you have... I'm fully convinced on the job-first approach, but how do you deal with the fact that you are not likely to find the same thing that you used to have before?
Can I switch both questions, but can I ask Simon to ask that from a technical perspective, from the skills perspective, and then to Vera and Misha on the operational side of things, because I think actually the 2 points will link very well here.
No, this microphone is a lot louder. This is a really important question, and obviously recognition of prior learning and opening up career pathways that are commensurate with a person's experience, to us, starts with understanding that experience and then seeing what the licensing and qualification, if there is a licensing and qualification gap, what that is, how that can be filled, what are quick pathways to licensing and qualification. I'm German. I know we do a lot of licensing and qualification. Other countries, the Netherlands, for example, where I live, licensing and qualifications is a lot simpler. There's a lot less restricted jobs. So finding ways and addressing that mismatch in qualification, mapping qualifications. The Ukraine is currently working on mapping their national qualifications framework to the EQF, the European qualification framework. And if you have the tool to translate those qualifications, and you were a doctor, a scientist, whatever, in Ukraine, I think it's incumbent on the host country to not underemploy people and to not waste human potential, and to find pathways for qualification, for licensing, and enabling people to work on those jobs. And of course, that is demeaning or not the nicest feeling in the world if you, as a doctor, have to work as a medical assistant, have to work in some lower qualified job while that process is ongoing. But I think if you create pathways for those processes, then that job first approach can work and should work, but not without having that dual intent in mind of how do we make the most of integrating this person here while providing them with a pathway back as well, pathway back to Ukraine, because I think in Ukraine that is an urgent issue to get people back to the country as well. So it's a delicate balance, it's a delicate pathway, but I think it's speaking from a perspective of a Western European country or a Central European country where there are labor shortages, where qualified workers are needed, making it difficult for people to have their qualifications recognized and accepted. Who benefits from that, right? Like that's.
Thank you. I would like to add something about your question is very, very actual. But there is no one approach to decide this problem. It's always individual approach. It's always one-to-one work with client, with person who is supported. But first of all, from what we started, it's really skills. We have to know what person can do, and it's not about experience. It's not about work experience. It's about life experience. Just because we do in our lives a lot of things, and sometimes we don't know about that. This my ability called me money bring. It's sometimes surprise. But yes, it's hard, it's some challenge, but one-to-one work with coaching, in coaching, it's works.
Great, thank you very much. And I think for many asylum seekers, many refugees, many migrants, that question of underemployment is actually crucial. But I think there's sometimes a read across for public employment services to other programs. So programs, for example, in Canada and Korea that look at the silver years, so 50, 55 plus, so not including me, of course, therefore. And these are programs that look at transversal skills and essentially try to bring people's psychological state back to positions that they may well be more suitable for as skills changes, as companies become flatter, and therefore the types of roles that they may have had or aspire to are simply no longer available. And so much of the coaching and counseling is more like career counseling, and involves essentially work to show people that this is not just simply about accepting a position below you. This is still a position that uses your talents, uses your transferable skills, and brings a certain dignity to work. And I suspect in the case of Switzerland and Germany, the issue is also that many of the refugees, as you rightly point out, are women, and many of them have young families, And for them, it's about showing their kids that they are independent in whatever situation and context that they may well be in. So I think there is a read across to other types of programs, but I think that for a coach, that's probably the most difficult issue above and beyond managing any trauma or mental disabilities there. Okay, unless there are any other burning questions, I think you can all be let off a couple of minutes early, if that's all right. Okay, so thank you very much for your participation and questions. I think a round of applause, please, for Simon, for Vera, and for Mika. And I've stopped them taking early flights back, so they will be available for tomorrow as well if you have any questions that you might want to raise with them. But two excellent presentations, so thank you very much again. Thank you.